The stars had never seemed so close, yet humanity had never felt so alone. Admiral Kyle Morrison stood quietly on the bridge of the UNS Defiant, watching the darkness of space through the massive viewing window. His crew worked silently around him, monitoring systems and checking readouts. Everything was calm, everything was normal until it was not. The sensors began screaming warnings across every station. Lieutenant Emma Patterson looked up from her console with wide eyes. Something was happening in the outer defense zone, something that should not be possible. A ship was appearing out of nowhere, materializing like a ghost emerging from a wall. The vessel was beautiful in a way that human engineering could never achieve. Its surface flowed like liquid metal, shifting and changing colors that seemed impossible. Purple blended into gold, then into shades that had no names in any human language. Kyle kept his face calm, even though his heart was racing. This was the moment humanity had prepared for during 200 years of careful planning. The possibility of alien contact had driven human technology forward at an incredible pace. Every weapon system, every defense platform, every strategic calculation had been built around one simple question. What if they come, and what if they are not friendly? Emma spoke with a steady voice that betrayed none of her nervousness. The alien ship was sending a signal, both audio and visual. Kyle nodded once and told her to put it through. The main screen flickered and changed, showing 3 alien beings seated in what looked like a chamber made entirely of crystal. The one in the center was tall and thin, with skin that shimmered like oil on water. It had 4 arms that moved with disturbing grace. The alien spoke and the translation came through perfectly clear. It called itself Ambassador Velthar of the Galactic Council. It said humanity had been observed achieving faster than light travel. The Council was offering membership in what it called the Great Community of Civilized Worlds. The word civilized carried a particular weight, as if humanity was being graded and found barely acceptable. Kyle introduced himself and his ship, but immediately corrected the alien's assumption. Humanity had not achieved faster than light travel. The ambassador seemed confused by this statement. Its expression changed in ways that Kyle could not quite read. If humanity had not developed such technology, then who had created the signal the Council detected 3 cycles ago? The answer was simple, and Kyle delivered it without emotion. A Dravik scout ship had entered human territory without permission 3 weeks earlier. It had refused all attempts at communication, and had begun scanning human colonies and cities. The humans had destroyed it before it could leave the system. The silence that followed was profound and heavy. The ambassador seemed genuinely shocked by this revelation. Its voice lost the condescending tone it had carried before. How could a species without advanced technology destroy a Dravik's vessel? Those ships possess shielding far beyond anything a primitive species should be able to threaten. Kyle explained the method in simple terms. Humanity used railguns, kinetic energy weapons that accelerated tungsten slugs to tremendous speeds. The Dravik's shields appeared designed to deflect energy weapons and exotic attacks. They were not prepared for several tons of metal moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The shields might as well have been made of paper. One of the other aliens asked about energy weapons with obvious disbelief in its voice. Kyle confirmed that humanity possessed lasers, particle beams, and plasma cannons. However, kinetic weapons had proven more effective in combat simulations against shielded targets. The penetration was simply superior. The word simulation seemed to confuse the Council representatives even more. Humanity had been running combat scenarios against alien ships before ever meeting aliens. Kyle explained patiently that humans had detected artificial signals from beyond their system 2 centuries ago. From that moment, preparation for possible hostile contact had become a priority. When the Dravik ship appeared and began its unauthorized reconnaissance, humanity had simply followed established defensive protocols. Ambassador Velthar tried to regain control of the conversation. The Draviks were not hostile, merely conducting standard surveys. This was normal procedure for the Council. Kyle's response was direct and firm. The ship had entered sovereign human territory without permission, refused communication, and conducted what appeared to be military reconnaissance. By any reasonable definition, that constituted an act of war. The third alien, who had remained silent until now, laughed with a sound like breaking glass. It found the concept of warfare quaint and outdated. The Council had abolished all conflict 8,000 years ago. Kyle acknowledged this achievement but pointed out that humanity was still working on eliminating war from their culture. They had successfully removed slavery, genocide, and totalitarian government. War was simply taking longer. The ambassador attempted to reassert authority over the situation. The council insisted that humanity cease all hostile actions immediately. The destruction of a council member's vessel was a serious offense requiring reparations and submission to council justice. Kyle listened carefully and then responded with measured words. With all due respect, humanity was not part of the council and therefore not subject to council law. The action taken had been legitimate self-defense. The ambassador stated flatly that every species in the galaxy was subject to council authority. This was not something open to discussion or debate. Kyle disagreed calmly. Everything was negotiable from humanity's perspective. What was not negotiable included Earth's sovereignty, humanity's right to defend itself, and their independence. Peaceful relations were welcome, trade agreements were possible, diplomatic protocols could be discussed. However, joining the council would only happen if humanity was treated as an equal partner from the beginning. The crystalline alien made a derisive sound. Equals was an absurd suggestion. Humanity lacked faster-than-light engines, energy shields, quantum communication, teleportation, and gravitational manipulation beyond crude rocket technology. They were centuries behind even the youngest council member species. Kyle acknowledged these technological gaps but made a crucial point. Humanity possessed enough kinetic weapons platforms throughout the solar system to destroy every ship in the council fleet if this visit turned hostile. The three aliens stared at him in obvious shock. The ambassador could barely speak above a whisper. Was humanity actually threatening the Galactic Council? Kyle corrected this characterization immediately. He was not making threats, but rather defending his species' sovereignty. There was an important difference between aggression and defense. He asked whether the ambassador wished to continue the conversation as equals, or if they should end the transmission now. After a long and uncomfortable silence, the ambassador agreed to continue discussions. However, the council would need to convene regarding humanity's unprecedented status. This situation had no precedent in their long history. Kyle told them to take whatever time they needed. Humanity had waited 200 years for first contact. They could wait longer for second contact. The transmission ended abruptly. Emma released a breath she had been holding and asked if they had just threatened the galactic government. Kyle settled back into his command chair and explained they had simply established the terms of engagement. The council needed to understand that humanity would not surrender their independence just because the aliens had more experience. Emma asked if the council would return. Kyle watched the alien ship beginning its retreat from human space. They would definitely return. The only question was what they would bring with them next time. The bridge crew remained quiet as the beautiful alien vessel disappeared into the darkness, leaving humanity to wonder what would come next in this dangerous new galaxy they had just discovered was far more crowded than anyone had imagined. The council chamber on Nexus Prime had witnessed thousands of years of peaceful discussion and gentle consensus. Today it felt different, charged with an energy that most of the gathered representatives had never experienced before. High Counselor Thexkar moved his 7 tentacles in agitated patterns as he addressed the assembly. His voice carried anger and disbelief in equal measure. These humans were barbarians in his view. They had destroyed a survey vessel without provocation. They had threatened the entire council with violence. They called it self-defense, but Thexkar saw only aggression and disrespect for proper authority. The chamber filled with murmurs of agreement from various species representatives. Ambassador Velthar maintained his composure, despite the obvious stress showing in his skin colors. He tried to explain that the humans had made some valid points during their conversation. The Dravik ship had indeed entered their territory without asking permission first. Perhaps the council had grown too accustomed to simply taking what it wanted from younger species. Counselor Dravin interrupted with obvious irritation. Since when did primitive species grant permission for anything? The council had brought order to 12,000 species across 100,000 worlds over millennia of careful guidance. They did not ask for permission from anyone, especially not from newcomers who barely understood the galaxy they lived in. A quiet voice cut through the growing argument. Counselor Markesh rarely spoke during sessions, but when she did, Others listened with respect. The ancient being existed as pure energy, her form floating and pulsing with thoughtful colors at her designated position. She suggested that perhaps the council had become complacent over the long, peaceful ages. The chamber fell silent as Markesh continued her observations. For 8,000 years, the council had encountered no species that challenged their authority in any meaningful way. Every new civilization they discovered was grateful for guidance, eager for technology, and humbled by the council's age and accumulated wisdom. They had forgotten what it meant to negotiate with true equals, because no equals had appeared in living memory. Thexkar protested immediately. These humans were hardly equals by any measure. They lacked faster-than-light travel, defensive shielding, teleportation capabilities, and dozens of other fundamental technologies. Calling them equals was absurd and insulting to species that had worked for thousands of years to achieve their current status. Markesh responded with patient firmness. The humans had destroyed a Dravik scout ship using technology the Council considered primitive. That fact alone deserved serious consideration and analysis. Draven dismissed this as a lucky shot against an unsuspecting target that had no reason to expect attack. Velthar pulled up data from the destroyed ship's final transmissions. The Dravik's pilot had executed 17 different evasive maneuvers before being struck. The humans had not fired a single shot in hopes of hitting their target. They had fired 47 projectiles from multiple platforms, creating what military analysts would call a kill box. Their predictive algorithms had calculated every possible evasion and placed metal in every possible escape route. The pilot never had a chance. The chamber grew uncomfortably quiet as representatives absorbed this information. Markesh asked to see the human solar system in detail. The central hologram shifted to display Earth's sun and its family of planets. Velthar highlighted various points as he explained what the Council had discovered. The humans called their star Sol, and had thoroughly explored every corner of their system. They maintained permanent settlements on their moon and on the fourth planet. Automated probes had visited every planet and major body. Mining operations dotted the asteroid belt between the fourth and fifth planets. At first glance, it appeared to be standard development for a pre-faster-than-light species. Velthar zoomed in on specific locations, and the display revealed something unexpected. The mining operations were not simple resource extraction facilities. They were weapons platforms, mass drivers capable of accelerating payloads to speeds that approached light itself. Throughout the system, hundreds of installations had been built with one purpose: defense against possible invasion. Draven asked the obvious question. Defense against what exactly? The humans had no indication that alien life existed until very recently. Why build such extensive military infrastructure against a threat that might not exist? Markesh answered softly that the humans had prepared for the possibility of contact. They assumed first contact might be hostile and built their defenses accordingly. Thexkar saw this as proof of their warlike nature. A peaceful species would not immediately assume hostility from unknown visitors. Markesh offered an alternative interpretation. Perhaps the humans were simply cautious rather than aggressive. Perhaps their history had taught them that hoping for peace while preparing for war was wiser than hoping for peace and preparing for nothing. Velthar continued, his briefing on human society and development. They had achieved global unity only 75 years ago, following devastating conflicts they called world wars. Their technological advancement had accelerated dramatically after learning the hard lessons of those conflicts. However, they had also made remarkable social progress, eliminating most forms of systematic oppression and establishing democratic governance across their entire species. Markesh asked when the humans had last fought a major war among themselves. Velthar checked his data and reported 83 years had passed since their last large-scale conflict. The ancient counselor pulsed thoughtfully at this information. The humans had unified their entire species, spread across their solar system, and built a defensive network worthy of established council members in less than a single century. Thexkar insisted this made them dangerous rather than impressive. Humans were unpredictable, violent, and clearly had no respect for proper authority. He proposed quarantining their system until they matured enough to join galactic society on appropriate terms. Markesh asked what would happen if the humans refused to accept quarantine. Draven stated the obvious solution. The council would enforce the quarantine through whatever means necessary. They had contained troublesome species before in the distant past. Markesh asked when exactly that had been. 3,000 years ago, or perhaps 4,000. The silence that followed was uncomfortable, because no one could remember the last time the Council had needed to enforce anything. Velthar proposed a different approach. Send a proper diplomatic mission to negotiate genuine relations rather than demanding submission. Learn more about these humans and their unique perspective. Perhaps they possessed insights the Council had lost over the millennia. Thexkar scoffed at this suggestion. What could a primitive species possibly teach the wise and ancient Council? Markesh answered quietly but firmly. They could teach the Council how to win fights with inferior technology. When was the last time anyone in the chamber had needed to think tactically or strategically? The Council had enjoyed peace for so long that they had forgotten the skills that originally brought them peace. They had never been tested by a worthy opponent. Draven asked carefully if Markesh was suggesting the Council had become vulnerable. Markesh replied that she was suggesting they had never been tested in recent history. They had no wars because they had no worthy opponents. They had grown comfortable relying on technology inherited from ancestors, rather than developing new innovations themselves. When was the last time the Council created something genuinely new, rather than refining something old? The question hung heavily in the air without answer. Markesh continued her argument. These humans had built their entire defensive network in less time than most species needed to achieve basic spaceflight. They did it without faster-than-light travel, without energy shields, without any advantages the Council took for granted. That accomplishment spoke to creativity, determination, and strategic thinking the Council might have lost. Thexkar demanded to know if Markesh wanted to reward human aggression. Markesh corrected him gently. She wanted to understand it and perhaps learn from it before someone more hostile than humans appeared. The galaxy was vast and the Council had explored only a small fraction of it. Better to learn these lessons from humans who were willing to talk than from enemies who might not be. Velthar volunteered to lead the diplomatic mission back to human space. Councillor Gentar, who had remained silent throughout the debate, stepped forward to join him. Her species was known for analytical thinking, and she found the human situation intriguing enough to study personally. Markesh approved both volunteers and declared the matter decided. The diplomatic mission would return to human space and negotiate with them as potential equals rather than subjects. They would learn human capabilities and intentions and report their findings back to the full Council. Thexkar asked what would happen if the humans proved unworthy of such consideration. Markesh replied that they would address that situation when and if it arose. She suspected the Council might be surprised by what the humans proved worthy of. After the session ended, Velthar approached Markesh privately with a question. Did she truly believe humans might teach the Council something important, or was this simply curiosity about an unusual species? Markesh's energy form pulsed with something. 3 weeks passed before the Council returned to human space. This time they brought 15 ships instead of 1. Kyle Morrison watched their approach from the bridge of the Defiant, now accompanied by 5 other human capital ships and a network of defense platforms that would impress any military strategist. Lieutenant Dan Harper reported from Tactical that all 15 vessels appeared to be diplomatic or research ships, with no obvious weapons visible. Kyle reminded him that obvious was the key word. They were dealing with technology humanity did not fully understand yet. Emma Patterson announced an incoming transmission from Ambassador Velthar and another Council member. Kyle told her to put it through. The view screen showed Velthar alongside a new alien covered in geometric patterns that shifted and recalculated constantly across its body. The new alien spoke first and introduced itself as Councillor Gentar. It began by apologizing for the Council's initial approach to humanity. They had been presumptuous and disrespectful of human sovereignty. The Council would like to begin again if humanity was willing. Kyle blinked in surprise. An apology from a galactic superpower was not what he had expected from this conversation. He told the counselor that he appreciated the candor, and humanity was indeed willing to start fresh. Gentar explained they had brought specialists in diplomacy, trade, cultural exchange, and technology. The Council wanted to propose formal negotiations for a treaty between humanity and the Council. Not as subjects, but as partners working together. Kyle noted that partners was a strong word. Humanity was still trying to understand what the Council actually was and how it operated. Belthar acknowledged this as a reasonable concern. The Council proposed an exchange of information. They would share details about Council structure, history, and member species. In return, they wanted to learn more about humanity, human history, and the remarkable defensive innovations humans had developed. Emma asked bluntly if they wanted human weapons technology. Gentar's patterns shifted in what might have been amusement. Not the weapons themselves, though they were impressive. The Council was more interested in the thinking behind them. The Council had enjoyed peace for so long they had nearly forgotten how to approach problems from a defensive or strategic perspective. Humanity clearly had not forgotten these skills. Kyle considered this carefully before responding. He needed to understand something before agreeing to anything. Why had the Council come back at all? They could have quarantined the human system, waited humanity out, or simply ignored them. Why choose diplomatic engagement instead? Belthar and Gentar seemed to exchange glances despite their very different biology. Belthar answered honestly. One of their eldest counselors had pointed out that the Council had grown complacent over millennia. They had spent thousands of years accepting new species without question, guiding them along established paths, teaching them Council ways. Humanity was the first species in recorded history to refuse that path and demand equal treatment from the beginning. Kyle asked if that made humanity interesting. Gentar corrected him. It made humanity valuable. The Council prized different perspectives, and humanity clearly thought differently than any current member species. That difference could benefit everyone. Kyle noted it could also be seen as a threat. Gentar agreed simply. Yes, it could be a threat, but potential threats that could be negotiated with were far better than potential threats that were simply contained. Containment bred resentment, and resentment bred conflict. The Council had learned this lesson over thousands of years. Kyle made his decision. Humanity would agree to formal negotiations, but they would happen in neutral territory with equal delegations, and everything would be on the table for discussion. Belthar agreed immediately. The Council had a diplomatic station. They could move to a location between the outer human system and the nearest Council outpost. Kyle said humanity would need to inspect it first. Belthar said of course they could. Over the next 6 weeks, the most unusual diplomatic negotiations in galactic history took place aboard the relocated station. The Council delegation was surprised to discover that humans had already developed preliminary theories for faster-than-light travel. They simply had not possessed the resources to build and test their designs yet. The human delegation was equally surprised to learn that the Council had hundreds of technologies they had never thought to develop because they had inherited more advanced alternatives from their ancestors. General Lisa Hayes, the human military advisor, stared at Gentar in disbelief when learning about teleportation technology. The counselor confirmed that instantaneous matter transport across light years had been standard Council technology for approximately 6,000 years. Lisa asked if they had never thought to weaponize it. Teleport bombs into enemy ships, teleport away their weapons, teleport hostile crews into empty space. The entire Council delegation went silent at these suggestions. Belthar finally asked why anyone would do such things. The technology was designed for transportation and logistics. Lisa pulled up a tactical display and explained that instant teleportation anywhere would be an incredibly powerful strategic tool. It would allow striking any target, retreating from any engagement, and resupplying any position instantly. It would fundamentally change warfare itself. Counselor Marrakesh, who had joined the negotiations personally, pointed out that the Council did not have warfare. Lisa corrected her politely. The Council did not have warfare now, but what would happen when they met a species that did? A species that was not as friendly as humanity. One of the other Council members asked skeptically if humans actually considered themselves friendly. Kyle answered that humanity was talking instead of shooting. That qualified as pretty friendly by human standards. The negotiations continued with both sides learning from each other. Humans offered insights into strategic thinking, tactical analysis, and defensive systems design. The Council offered access to technologies that would accelerate human development by centuries. Faster-than-light travel, advanced materials, energy shields, and medical technology that could extend human lifespans significantly. The real breakthrough came during a private conversation between Kyle and Marrakesh. Kyle stated plainly that the Council was afraid. It was not a question. Markesh's energy form pulsed with surprise and asked what made him think so. Kyle explained that the council was offering too much too quickly. Advanced technology, full membership, trade agreements heavily favoring humanity. This generosity was not coming from kindness alone. The council was worried about something. After a long pause, Markesh admitted he was perceptive. Yes, the council had concerns. The galaxy was changing around them. They had detected signals from beyond explored space suggesting other civilizations. Perhaps other power blocks similar to the council existed out there. They had also encountered evidence of ancient conflicts and extinct civilizations far more advanced than the council. These vanished peoples had left behind ruins, weapons, and mysteries that no one understood. Kyle summarized the situation. The council thought these potential threats would require military thinking to address. Markesh corrected him gently. They thought these threats would require adaptive thinking, the ability to see problems from new angles, to innovate under pressure, to compete and strive and push boundaries, skills the council had largely lost after millennia of peace and comfortable stagnation. Kyle simplified it further. The council wanted humans to teach them how to fight. Markesh corrected him again. They wanted humans to teach them how to survive when everything they had built was challenged. Fighting might be part of survival, but strategy, adaptability, and creativity under pressure were the real skills they had allowed to atrophy over time. Kyle leaned back and asked the obvious question. If humanity taught the council these skills, what would stop them from using those skills against humanity? Markesh admitted there was nothing to stop them. Humanity would have to trust that council culture and values built over millennia would prevent betrayal. Just as the council had to trust that human military capabilities would not be used to conquer other species once humanity gained access to faster-than-light technology. Kyle said this was a hell of a foundation for an alliance. Mutually assured trust rather than mutually assured destruction. Markesh replied that trust was the only foundation that truly mattered in the end. Power could be balanced and resources could be shared, but trust had to be earned by both sides. Was humanity willing to earn council trust while the council earned human trust? Kyle thought about everything that had led to this moment. Humanity's long history of both conflict and cooperation, their cautious approach to the unknown, their fierce determination to remain free and sovereign. He looked at the ancient being floating before him and made his choice. Yes, humanity was willing, but only on one condition. Markesh told him to name it. Kyle stated his terms clearly. Humanity would not join the council as a dependent or student species. They would join as full members with full voting rights, and they would maintain complete military independence. The council could teach humans their technology, and humans would share strategic insights, but neither side would dictate how the other defended themselves. Markesh remained silent for a long time before responding. What Kyle asked fair. The full council assembly was more impressive than Kyle had imagined possible. Representatives from over 11,000 species filled the vast chamber on Nexus Prime. Their forms ranged from energy beings like Markesh to massive creatures that communicated through chemical signals to artificial intelligence, collectives housed in crystalline matrices. Kyle stood at the central podium with his delegation, including Emma Patterson, Lisa Hayes, and Dr. Aaron Fletcher, who was humanity's leading physicist. They were surrounded by more alien life than had ever been gathered in one place in human history. High Counselor Thexkar addressed them with formal tentacle gestures. The Galactic Council had reviewed humanity's petition for full membership with unprecedented autonomy. While they acknowledged human capabilities and insights, many council members remained skeptical. Therefore, they had devised a proving trial for humanity to face. Kyle had expected something like this. He asked what kind of trial they had in mind. Gentar stepped forward to explain. 3 days ago, the council had lost contact with a colony world called Reshitar. It was a mining world in the outer reaches of council space, with a population of approximately 50,000. Most systems were automated with only a small sentient workforce. Velthar admitted they did not know what had happened. The last transmission mentioned some kind of technical malfunction in the orbital defense grid, followed by complete communication blackout. The council had sent 3 investigation teams. None had reported back. Kyle understood immediately. The council wanted humanity to investigate. Thexkar corrected him. They wanted more than investigation. The Council wanted humans to resolve the situation using their strategic thinking. The Council had dozens of species with advanced technology, but they clearly lacked human tactical adaptability. If humanity could prove their approach had real value, then it would justify their unprecedented demands. Aaron asked what would happen if they failed. Thexakar stated that humanity would then join the Council under standard terms, as a protected species learning from their elders until they matured sufficiently for greater autonomy. Kyle looked at his team. Emma nodded slightly. Lisa's expression showed she was already running scenarios in her mind. Aaron looked excited rather than concerned about the challenge. Kyle told them humanity would accept the trial, but they would need access to all data about Reshtar, its defenses, and the investigation teams the Council had sent. Gentar agreed immediately. She asked when they could depart. Lisa said they would need 12 hours to review the data and prepare. They would leave at 0800 hours. The Council provided a fast transport vessel that could cross hundreds of light years in just hours. Kyle insisted on bringing the Defiant as well. This surprised the Council. Thexakar protested that the transport was far superior to the human vessel. Kyle corrected him. The transport was a Council vessel. If they were walking into an unknown situation, he wanted a ship that humans understood completely with weapons they knew exactly how to use. Velthar asked if Kyle expected combat. Kyle replied that he expected the unexpected. That was Rule 1 of tactical planning. The journey to Reshitar took 16 hours. The team spent most of that time reviewing data and debating possible scenarios. Lisa reviewed tactical displays in the Defiant's briefing room. 3 ships had gone missing. All of them were Council vessels with advanced shields and weapons. Whatever was at Reshitar had either overwhelmed them quickly or captured them intact. Aaron noted that the last transmission from Reshitar mentioned a malfunction in their orbital defense grid. Perhaps it was a technical issue cascading through connected systems. Maybe the investigation ships got caught in the same malfunction. Emma suggested an alternative. Something might have used the defense grid against the ships. If she wanted to trap vessels, turning their own defenses into weapons would be the smart approach. Kyle asked if someone could actually do that with Council technology. Aaron explained that Council systems were highly automated and interconnected for efficiency. This created vulnerabilities. If someone compromised the central control system, they could potentially turn the whole network against its operators. Lisa suggested pirates as a possibility. Emma pointed out that the Council did not have pirates. They had eliminated poverty and scarcity centuries ago. Kyle asked the key question then. Who would benefit from attacking a remote mining colony? That question remained unanswered as they approached Reshitar. The planet appeared normal on long-range scans. A rocky world with extensive mining operations, several small settlements, and an orbital station. As they got closer, concerning details emerged. Emma reported detecting the 3 Council investigation ships. They were in stable orbit but showing no power signatures. They were completely dead in space. Kyle asked about life signs. Emma scanned and found faint biological readings on all 3 vessels. The crews were alive but unconscious. Lisa asked about the colony itself. Emma said the orbital station was still active and she was reading power signatures from surface settlements. But there were no communications, no movement, no standard traffic patterns anywhere. Lisa stated flatly that it was a trap. Everything was too intact and too preserved. Whatever was here wanted things looking normal until someone came to investigate. Kyle agreed completely. That was why they would not fall for it. He told Emma to try hacking into the Council ship networks remotely. Emma said maybe she could if she got close enough without triggering whatever shut the ships down. Kyle told Aaron to work with Emma on that problem. He told Lisa to develop tactical options for every scenario she could imagine. He would coordinate with the Council team on the transport. Over the next 6 hours, they pieced together what had actually happened. Aaron discovered that the orbital defense grid had been compromised by a sophisticated artificial intelligence virus. It was not created by any known species but had been pieced together from dozens of Council technologies. Someone had studied Council systems extensively and created a weapon specifically designed to exploit their interconnected nature. The virus had spread from the defense grid to any ship coming within range. It shut down their systems and incapacitated crews through cascading life support failures that put everyone into emergency stasis. Aaron said this was terrifying. The virus was elegant in design. It did not destroy anything but simply put everything into a dormant state. Someone could walk in and take whatever they wanted from an entire defenseless planet. Kyle asked who had created it. Aaron said unknown, but he had found something interesting in the code. The virus was designed to stop after a certain time period of about 96 hours. Then everything would reset automatically and the virus would delete itself completely. Lisa understood immediately. This was a proof of concept test. Someone was testing this weapon on a remote colony to see if it worked. If the council did not figure out what was happening before the reset, the attacker would learn they could do this anywhere. Kyle asked if they could stop it. Aaron said yes, but not with council technology. Their systems were too integrated. Trying to purge the virus from within would just trigger more cascades. They needed to shut down every networked system on the planet simultaneously, then reboot with isolated protocols. Emma pointed out that would require cutting power to an entire planet's infrastructure, including life support and medical systems. Aaron explained it would only be for about 90 seconds. Backup systems would kick in automatically, but it required precise coordination and timing. Kyle asked Gentar over the communication link if the council could coordinate something like that. The counselor admitted they could not. They had never needed to coordinate manual control like that. Their systems were designed for efficiency and automation, not manual intervention. Lisa said humans could do it. If they positioned the Defiant and the Council transport at specific orbital points, and if Aaron could build a broad-spectrum electromagnetic pulse from combined technologies, they could knock out everything simultaneously. Emma asked about the colonists and the crews on those ships. Aaron said the ships would be fine because their life support was already in emergency mode. The colony was trickier. They would need teams on the ground to manually ensure critical systems came back online immediately after the pulse. Kyle made his decision quickly. They would do it. He told Emma to coordinate positioning with the council transport. He told Aaron to build the pulse device. He told Lisa to organize landing teams with both human and council members. What followed was the most complex coordinated operation in human history. The Defiant and council transport maneuvered into exact positions. Aaron assembled an electromagnetic pulse device that was a hybrid of human and alien technology. It should not have worked, but it did. Landing teams prepared to deploy the instant power was restored to the surface. Kyle asked if everyone was ready. Confirmations came from all teams across multiple channels. He gave the order to execute. The pulse washed over Reshitar and its orbital space like an invisible wave. Every electronic system shut down at exactly the same moment. For 90 seconds, an entire planet went completely dark and silent. Then, in carefully orchestrated sequence, systems began coming back online. But this time each one was isolated, rebooting with fresh protocols that Aaron had prepared. Protocols. 6 months after humanity's admission to the Council, the galaxy was changing in ways both subtle and profound. The most visible change was the formation of what humans called the Strategic Defense Initiative. It was a council-wide program to audit, upgrade, and diversify defensive systems across all member worlds. General Lisa Hayes headed it jointly with a coalition of council military specialists. It represented the first time in millennia that the council had actively prioritized defense over simple peacekeeping. Kyle Morrison sat in what had become his office on Nexus Prime, reviewing reports from across council space. He still commanded the UNS Defiant, but increasingly his role was diplomatic and strategic rather than purely military. Commander Emma Patterson entered carrying a datapad. She had been promoted and now served as humanity's primary liaison to the Council's vast communication network. She told Kyle he needed to see something important. She activated a holographic display showing initial results from the defense audits. Every single Council world reviewed so far had at least 3 critical vulnerabilities that could have been exploited by hostile forces. Kyle asked how serious the vulnerabilities were. Emma explained they were serious, enough that Gentar estimated a coordinated attack could have crippled up to 30% of Council infrastructure before anyone even realized they were under attack. Kyle whistled at this revelation. That information was going to make some Council members very uncomfortable. Emma agreed it already had caused discomfort. But the interesting part was that almost all vulnerabilities existed because Council systems had been optimized for efficiency and convenience, rather than security. The technology itself was not flawed. It had just been applied without considering the possibility of hostile intent. Kyle noted this was because the council had never needed to consider hostile intent for thousands of years. Emma pulled up another display with more interesting news. Kyle had suggested the council should teach strategic thinking as part of standard education. Several species had decided to try it on a pilot basis. The results were remarkable. Students exposed to strategic thinking courses showed improved problem-solving across all domains, not just defensive planning but everything. They were innovating more, questioning assumptions more, and combining multiple perspectives more effectively. Kyle said strategic thinking as general education was brilliant. When people learned to anticipate opponents and plan for contingencies, they developed skills that applied to everything in life. Emma mentioned that Gentar had called it mental muscle the council had allowed to atrophy over time, but she thought they might be seeing the beginning of a new renaissance. Species were starting to develop technologies and solutions they had not considered in centuries because they were approaching old problems with completely new frameworks. A chime indicated an incoming transmission. Kyle gestured for Emma to stay as he accepted it. Markesh's energy form appeared pulsing with urgency. She told Kyle they had a situation. A council exploration vessel had encountered something in deep space. The captain was requesting immediate strategic consultation. Kyle asked what they had found. Markesh explained it was a derelict structure of unknown origin. Massive in scale, approximately the size of a small moon, it was clearly artificial, clearly ancient, and according to initial scans, it was still partially active. Kyle asked if this was one of those extinct civilizations she had mentioned months ago. Markesh said possibly, but there was more. The structure was emitting signals. Not random noise, but organized patterns. Some xenolinguists thought it might be an attempt at communication. Emma asked skeptically if an extinct civilization was trying to communicate. Markesh said or whatever had inherited their technology. She told Kyle the council had no protocols for this situation. They had explored for millennia, but had never encountered active artifacts from precursor civilizations. She asked how he would recommend they proceed. Kyle considered the situation carefully. This was exactly the kind of scenario the council struggled with. Not a technical problem with a technical solution, but an unknown situation requiring judgment, risk assessment, and strategic thinking. He told them first not to approach the structure until they knew more. He told Emma to work with the communications team to analyze those signals. Markesh said the exploration captain wanted to dock with the structure and investigate directly. He argued they would learn more from direct examination than from remote scans. Kyle countered that the captain might get his entire crew killed if the structure had active defenses. This was exactly the kind of decision that required risk assessment. What was the potential gain versus the potential loss? Markesh admitted the potential gain was immense. If this was precursor technology, it could advance council understanding by millennia. But Kyle was right about the risk. Kyle proposed a compromise. Send in remote probes first, heavily shielded, expendable, designed to trigger any defensive responses. If the structure was hostile, they would lose probes instead of lives. If it proved safe, they could proceed with manned investigation. Markesh said the captain would not like that approach. His species valued bold exploration above caution. Kyle said firmly that the captain needed to learn that bold and reckless were not the same thing. Bold meant taking calculated risks with plans for contingencies. Reckless meant charging in without understanding the danger. If the captain could not tell the difference, he should not be commanding a council vessel. There was a long pause before Markesh pulsed with amusement. She said Kyle sounded more like a council elder than some actual council elders. She would relay his recommendation. She asked if he would join her in overseeing this situation. Kyle said absolutely. He told Emma to prepare the Defiant. He told Markesh they would meet her flagship at the coordinates. Over the next week, the situation with the precursor structure developed into something extraordinary. The signals Emma's team analyzed were not communication attempts at all. They were teaching programs. The structure was an ancient library designed to share knowledge with whoever found it. But it had defensive protocols that would have destroyed any ship approaching without understanding the proper identification sequences. Those sequences were hidden in the signal patterns. It was a test, essentially, to ensure that only species advanced enough to decode them could access the library's contents. Dr. Aaron Fletcher worked with council scientists to decode the systems. He said it was brilliant design. This civilization wanted to share their knowledge, but only with species mature enough to use it wisely. Lisa asked how mature they needed to be. Aaron explained mature enough to think strategically, to consider consequences, to prepare for risks before acting. If they had approached this structure the way the council initially wanted, with direct investigation without analysis, the defensive systems would have activated. They would have lost ships and lives. Gentar added that the human approach of careful assessment and remote investigation had demonstrated exactly the kind of thinking the structure was designed to screen for. They had passed the test by accident simply by applying human strategic thinking to an unknown situation. The library's contents were staggering. Technologies far beyond even the Council's advanced capabilities. Historical records of the civilization that built it. They were called the Veshtar and had apparently spanned much of the galaxy millions of years ago. And there were warnings about threats they had faced. Threats that had ultimately led to their extinction. Markesh said softly that they had been destroyed by an enemy they never saw coming. They had possessed technology, resources, and numbers, but they had become complacent over time. They assumed their superiority was permanent and unchangeable. When a younger and hungrier civilization developed weapons specifically designed to counter Veshtar technology, it took them by complete surprise. By the time they adapted their thinking, it was already too late. The parallels to the Council's current situation were painfully obvious to everyone. Kyle asked Markesh privately if this was what she had been afraid of all along, that the Council would suffer the same fate as the Veshtar. Markesh admitted yes, that was her fear. The Council had been stable for so long, they had stopped questioning their assumptions. They stopped innovating and preparing for threats they could not imagine. When humanity appeared and demonstrated capabilities the Council had not considered, it was both a revelation and a warning. Kyle said Markesh had seen humanity as a preview of what could come from unknown space. Markesh corrected him. She had seen humanity as an opportunity, a chance to learn adaptation before they faced a threat they could not handle. The Veshtar had left this library as a warning to future civilizations. Success breeds complacency, and complacency breeds extinction. Humanity had helped the Council remember that lesson before it was too late. Kyle asked what would happen now. Markesh said now they would change, not by abandoning their values or becoming warlike, but by remembering that peace must be defended, prosperity must be earned, and wisdom must be continuously renewed. Humanity had brought the Council competition again. Not hostile competition, but the healthy kind that drives innovation and growth. Over the following months, the changes accelerated throughout Council space. Member species began integrating strategic thinking, a